Oh, great. Thank you. Um, so it is Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. And I thank Monica for her efforts to keep recording these. She wasn't here last week, so if anybody is looking for the recording of last week's event, it doesn't exist as far as I know, unless somebody else, recorded it. So I apologize for that. I I could actually get trained on how to do that. The thing is, I don't really know how to like pin myself so that it doesn't show everybody in the recording, and I don't want to put up a recording with break everybody's anonymity. So maybe Monica, we can talk about that sometime. So I was talking about the fact that I'm in New Orleans. Oh, and there's somebody there from New Orleans, Carol. Oh, so we were on the retreat. I just was teaching a retreat in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, that ended on Sunday. Got a couple of the folks. I saw that Carolyn was here as well. So welcome everyone. Uh, Always just helpful for me to have this meeting every week and like check in with you and with me and with the world. So we'll start with a 20-minute sit and then I will talk for a little while. I am going to need to close this down about 5 minutes early because I have really pushed the limits of the generosity of this hotel to let me stay over my checkout time. But I'll probably try to stop a little before one, and I usually run over that. Well, 1 o'clock here, sorry, 11 o'clock in the Pacific. Anyway, whatever time zone you're in, you get the idea. Yes, I'm guzzling water because it's like a million degrees here, although it is air conditioned in my room, but I was out for a walk. So, okay, enough Kevin-ness. Let's sit, get inside ourselves. Just settling into a comfortable posture, preferably if you can sit upright in a uh, what I would call a strong or solid posture, which you kind of have to figure out what that means for you. But stability and alignment really help the mind. This connection between the body and mind becomes apparent when we notice how our posture affects our thinking and our mood. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze and begin by turning your attention inward just to feel what's going on for you right now. So this beginning of meditation is checking in with both the body and the mood or emotional states. Seeing if the body is comfortable and alert, or if there's a restlessness or any unpleasant sensations. Not that we're here to fix those or that we can't meditate with those, but just acknowledging that. What are you feeling right now? You might be in a pleasant mood or an unpleasant mood. You might be in a neutral mood. But it's important to acknowledge that. We're not trying to bypass or jump over reality, sort of fix ourselves with some kind of meditation auto fix. This is really about being present and letting the power of mindfulness and presence do its work. And starting to connect with the breath, feeling the body, the movement of breath, the chest, the belly, the sensations, the air touching as it enters and leaves, nostrils. The beginning of a sitting is always kind of interesting. Necessarily, we have to sort of fake it in the beginning of a meditation. It's like we're acting as if we're meditating. But then that acting as if can can start to take hold if we stay with it. One strategy for settling is to lengthen or slow the breath a little bit. We do this in yoga and qigong, where we're using the breath specifically to calm the body, to calm the nervous system. We're not trying to force that to happen, but just bringing a kind of ease to the breath. And even as you do that, feeling, being with the breath in a very intimate way. The breath is what sustains our life, moment by moment. Being with that movement and the sensations and that whole experience is being with the movement of life. It's natural that the mind keeps generating thoughts, words, and images, keeps streaming through the mind, even when we are quite focused, even when we're very present with the breath. The thoughts may continue in the background. And if we aren't particularly focused, then thoughts can sweep us away completely. We find ourselves just lost in some dream. So we don't have to berate ourselves for that or think we're failing at meditation. Just notice it. Meditation isn't about achieving anything or getting somewhere. It's just about showing up here for whatever whatever is happening. And yes, when we notice the mind has wandered, we come back, but we come back gently, not jumping back to the breath, sort of feeling ashamed, but just going, oh, there it is, the mind doing what it does. There's the dawning realization that we are not really control of our minds. We are not the masters of this mind. We are in the process of training the attention, but that is a process to areas that are particularly useful in our mindfulness practice are to notice the themes of our thoughts, sort of types of thoughts we're having, and then noticing the emotional repercussions. If you're caught up in some concern or worry, judgment, when you come back to the breath, seeing how you feel now. And clearly we see the connection between thoughts and emotions. The connection goes both ways. If an emotion appears, we start thinking about it or processing it. And this whole enterprise of mental, emotional interaction is something we can observe. And when we come back to the breath, we try to let go or become just a little less entangled. It's okay. It might be unpleasant, might be pleasant, but it doesn't have to dominate our experience. We can just observe. Okay. Navigating the bell and the computer. Um, yeah, I'm sort of, well, I want to talk about intimacy today. Um, and I'll start by saying that one of the exercises that I use in some of my retreats, and actually we did this exercise this past week um, for a flowering lotus retreat, is asking this question: what was the desire that your addiction was trying to satisfy? And I actually was introduced to that, a different version of it, but very similar, um, from Larry Yang almost 30 years ago at a Spirit Rock Day Long that I went to. And when I addressed that and kept asking that question of myself, like, oh, I was trying to satisfy my desire to get high and then to like, you know, feel good or whatever. Eventually I came to the conclusion that for me, and I think this is very similar to what a lot of people say. People put it in different words, but um, that I was trying to satisfy my desire to feel loved, not to be loved, because being loved doesn't necessarily make us feel loved. Um, and that kind of connects with um, the there's like a modern take on addiction that says it's somehow about the loss of connection or the longing for connection. And um and we're sort of living in this era when apparently a lot of, like, particularly they're talking about young men feeling loneliness, right? And um, you don't have to be a young man to feel lonely, obviously, but just that one group that's particularly plagued with this apparently. And and losing our ability to know how to connect with people, which sort of, makes me think of the famous last line of Howard's End, the Ian Forster book, that is just the final sentence is only connect. I'm sure many of you have seen that because it shows up in Dharma books a lot. Um, so, I was just like thinking about this, and I know, like, when I think about, particularly before I got sober, uh, but even after sobriety, that there was a lot of times like chasing something to get from other people, that people can't give me, like that, and that, it manifests in sort of sexual misconduct where you think you're going to get intimacy and love, and you're not. Where we're acting, and the longing for connection gets mixed up with lust, um, and so uh, I guess sort of like cut to the chase in a way here, that there is no, well, I guess I'm not cutting very well to the chase. That the idea of connecting with other people is a tricky one because we can't fully bond with another human being. That inevitably we are separate, in certainly in practical terms. And typically when we are trying to attain some sort of fullness or wholeness through connecting with a human being, it doesn't last. And that's, the problem with a romantic love. As most of you are old enough to probably have experienced this, maybe more than once, that, we find someone, make a connection, and it feels like, I finally got it. And then it changes, right? And when a relationship changes from that romance into just a functional relationship, then all of a sudden it's a whole other thing. And it might work out, or it might just fizzle at that point, and uh, I, you know, I had enough experience with that to be pretty familiar with it. And and in fact, at that point, that can get really unpleasant because it's like someone's taken your drug away. Like, I'm not getting what I wanted from you anymore, and um, there's this withdrawal, and so obviously, and at the same time, connection with other people is vital, right? So how we balance that? What is it that we're expecting? What is it that we're getting? And how are we managing all that? It's interesting to me that, the Buddha set up this system for the monastics to live without any physical intimacy, and yet they live in great proximity in a quite intimate way, even in silence. So, he recognized the importance of community and connection, and yet presumably sort of also understood the limitations. So, okay, if I'm going to say I'm going to get cut to the chase, that to me is the experience one can have in meditation, where, and I use this word intentionally today in describing our relationship with the breath, that we become intimate with ourselves, and that sense of wholeness, that sense of need to connect, can be satisfied, at least for moments, internally, and that's a really beautiful experience to have. And it's a beautiful experience, and it offers us an insight, right? That we can, oh, we don't have to go looking outside ourselves. And of course, that's a spiritual principle, beyond just the idea of intimacy, just in terms of happiness or fulfillment, that that it's within. And how can we cultivate that? And how can we be at ease with that? So that brings to mind then the complications of intimacy, the both intimacy with ourselves and intimacy with others. And what I think that I feel like I'm sort of not whatever. I don't think I'm saying anything new or original today. It's just things that are kind of going around in my head. That the problem with intimacy is that it makes us vulnerable. And this, of course, is what often happens in relationships, where we become vulnerable and feel uncomfortable in that. And that can trigger a lot of fear, and fear often triggers anger. And thus we wind up in an intimate relationship where there is a lot of anger. And, that's very, very kind of paradoxical thing. Oh, I thought we loved each other. Why do we fight all the time? You know, so that's certainly one reason that people get into conflict when they're in intimate relationships. When we don't let people in, we don't feel vulnerable in the same way to casual relationships or functional relationships, work, whatever. There isn't the same emotional vulnerability. But when we really open up, and when we feel that there's a need there with someone, and we feel, then that's like they have some power over us, and it can be really scary. And the same thing happens and is one of the main blockages in meditation itself, is that we are afraid of the intimacy we experience with our own life, with our own feelings, with our own mind, with our emotions, with our own body. Lots of people who have experienced physical trauma or abuse, it's not comfortable for them to become intimate with the experience of their body. When we see the thoughts that arise in our mind very clearly, it can be very disturbing to realize that's coming from me, coming from inside my experience. So that's threatening. And then just the pure experience of an emotion. And you guys know by now, most of you at least know, that this is something I talk about a lot, which is just feeling. What am I being present with what I am feeling right now? And why is that so difficult? It seems quite simple. There's only a few things happening that I can perceive. I can perceive sense experiences. I can perceive my thoughts happening. And then I can perceive my feeling life. And it's not really hard for me to look at things or to hear things. But when I say, turn your attention to the felt experience, the feeling realm, people can be like, I don't really know how to do that. What is that? And you know, I not want to suggest like, that I'm judging anybody for that because that was exactly my experience when I first was confronted with that guidance. You know, your practice is to feel, I was told. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm still discovering it, working with it. I have a good idea what it is, but it's not a verbal experience. So that, and it's not an ordinary sense experience. So it's not something we can just say, open your eyes and you're seeing, if you have functioning eyes. Um, so this idea of intimacy has these layers of challenge that we face, in a on a regular basis in our lives, and we struggle with. But I mean, I'm saying we. I'm saying I could just say I, but I don't think that things that I experience are terribly unique. So I do think that having a meditation practice that you can turn to on a regular basis, and even the ability to, in a moment, turn your mindfulness to your inner life and feel your okayness, feel your existing wholeness, that there is nothing missing, that this is one of the really valuable things that meditation can bring for us. This inner personal intimacy and safety. It takes some time. We have to train ourselves to be able to do that. I think for most people, maybe people who, are functional people, people who don't have problems, emotional problems aren't, you know, anyway, maybe there are people who just sort of like have that naturally. There probably are, you know, but certainly for me, and I think it's common among addicts. I mean, why else were we behaving the way we behaved if there wasn't something really out of balance in our ability to experience life and thus to be intimate with life, with ourselves, with others. So I guess it's partly a pitch just for meditation and to cultivate that because it's not something we can rely on externally. We can have relationships, we can have intimate relationships, and we can have long-term intimate relationships. Um, but it doesn't really solve the existential challenge. And that's where I think this practice addresses, and maybe too allows us to see that even when we have cultivated that to some extent, that it's not something we're not always going to be comfortable in our skin. We're not always going to feel comfortable with our feelings. We're not always going to feel intimacy or wholeness. And that's the other aspect of practice, the acceptance aspect of practice, which is sometimes life is painful. Sometimes my inner life is disturbed and I can't just kick it back in. And that's, for me, I think that's a really important aspect of recovery is that sometimes I'm just not going to be okay. And I'm going to need to continue on and not drink or use and not take unwholesome or unwise actions in that moment when I am out of balance, when I am disturbed, and that I can continue to show up. And that's where precepts and boundaries and programs, the external things, protect us. And that's where we go to our friends as well, or the support systems. So I feel actually quite vulnerable just talking about this in this way. So I hope you're not judging me, but who cares? Whatever. I hope this is useful that in some way, and so I'll just open it up and see if there's any comments or thoughts. Well, there we go. Don't hesitate. Hi, John.
Hi. And in the rooms, I don't necessarily abide by it, but there's a saying, there are no coincidences. And so you raised this subject of intimacy and of love, connectedness. And I've just begun reading. It's been on my shelf probably since the 1970s, and I've taken stabs at it before, but it's The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm.
Uh,
And on page 10, and it's not, he just makes the point. He moves from like the Garden of Eden experience, us moving out of a nature that we can no longer re-access because we're now human, not part of nature, although we still remain part of nature. Anyway, we go
mhm.
on our human journey, and he moves through primitive society. And then he says, um, it's quite different when the same situation is chosen by an individual in a culture that has left behind these common practices, tribal,
Yeah.
community events, right?
Uh-huh.
And then it says, alcoholism and drug addiction are the forms which the individual chooses in a non-orgiastic culture. And he doesn't mean orgy necessarily, but that kind of frenetic community dancing, getting in the bushes after the dancing because they were doing what they wish they were doing, standing up when they were dancing. And then the next day the guys go off to war, but the babies have been sown, boom, you know. So there's kind of a method to nature. And now we find ourselves alienated in modern society. And he just happens to say alcoholism and drug addiction manifest there, and then he moves on to say, so does sexuality. And it kind of takes uh, not very different from alcoholism and drug addiction.
Right.
And you described it just as he does. This expectation, he doesn't say necessarily love, but of real connection, something like that,
Yeah.
which could be love, and it fails. And the point so far in his book is to be that we don't fall in love. Love is a thing that takes a hell of a lot of work and practice, like any art form, whether it's medicine or engineering or sculpture or painting or music. And that makes a lot of sense to me after 67 years of floundering around trying to find love, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's the first time in my life I went through the steps, and I feel I have achieved finally a sobriety which I'm hoping and expecting to be permanent this time because I didn't sponsor myself.
Hmm.
So, your notions about meditation, I've also been sitting with Bhikkhu Bodhi, and
Hmm.
I'm reading one of his books about the Eightfold Path, and he says, after we get through the Eightfold Path, we return kind of to the beginning, like Eliot said, T.S. Eliot, but we know it as if for the first time. And right view, instead of becoming something maybe like powerlessness and recovery, becomes direct view, right? And we
Hmm.
begin to see our consciousness, our body, the entire connectivity. And as it relates to our existence, to the world, that thing they call emptiness, includes all the processes that generate this wonderful experience. And I'm finding a great deal of, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everybody here. Obviously, I've gone on too long, but when you brought it up, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
Thanks,
So
John.
thank you.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's great. Appreciate it very much. Um, Mel, hi. Go ahead.
Uh, I don't I don't have any when you brought up intimacy, I said, "Oh no." Well, I just wanted to just take a shot at trying to be intimate too and share that just before this talk, I went out to brunch with my aunts and my sister, and I spoke to my sister, and this is just I'm just trying to just sit with feeling hurt and not take it to being angry. She threw the person that, well, I see my part in it, but she basically brought up the person that I used to be. And I had just told my sponsee last night, it takes our family a long time to come around, and I should have seen this coming, that it would happen to me the next day. But man, my feelings are hurt, and it's hard to be hurt and not take it to anger. So yeah, that's all. I just wanted to share that with the group.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, thanks. Well, there you go. That's, the family. It's that primal intimacy that is sort of very, we're tied to them from birth, obviously, and yeah, it makes us vulnerable for sure. Yeah. I wanted to acknowledge that I said before that there were a couple people from the retreat last week, but I'm realizing now that there are quite a few. So hello, all of you. Thank you for showing up. It's nice to see you guys. Uh, it was, I hope the retreat was beneficial for you. It was very lovely for me, and I am excited to be connected with the South and with Flowering Lotus. It's a treat to find another community to be part of. Oh, John, hey, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. Um, so I was at your retreat in Southern Dharma and made discoveries. One of which was that I'm thinking all the time, right? I didn't realize that was occurring until I actually meditated and
Mm,
started thinking all the time and realizing that that was a challenge. But the same thing applies to, yeah, right. The same thing I'm discovering applies to feelings.
yeah.
And you talked about this, and I think I asked you. I said, "Well, I don't think I'm feeling anything." The fact is, it's so constant. It's almost a drone.
Yeah.
It's almost drone-like, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't hear it. I don't need. And now when I'm finally sort of, and just what you're talking about today, now that I'm sort of tuning in, it's like, oh Jesus,
Oh,
what the hell do I
uh-oh.
do with all that?
Yeah.
So I just want to sort of acknowledge the fact that through this process of meditating, that lots of discoveries are being made, and I appreciate your process through it too. So thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thanks, John. I mean, you know, the breath is just so important. That's all I can say. Like the the breath, functions to help us to modulate our mood states, our energy states. And as you know, as I talk about a lot, if we if we start to see the feelings as more energetic or in this nervous system and in the body, then it becomes kind of less threatening. They don't imply some, you know, something that's like in the DSM, like some kind of, you know, um, diagnosis that we need. You know, what's wrong with me, and what is I have to like name and label a feeling, and then I have to find out what the prescription is for that feeling. And it's like, no, it's just, you know, it's just life. And you know, the Four Noble Truths, there's dukkha, there's it's if there's unpleasant feeling, then there's probably some clinging somewhere. Well, clinging, you know, happens just like thoughts and feelings. Clinging is part of that whole system, and so the dukkha is being generated pretty regularly. I don't know if it's constantly, but the potential is there all the time, and so yeah, it takes a lot of work, a lot of tolerance, a lot of resilience. Um, you know, and this practice, mindfulness, loving kindness, like as a felt thing, not just like repeating phrases, but like connecting with intimacy with yourself, caring for yourself. Um, this is what the power that we cultivate to be really present. You know, it's another one of those things that sounds really good. Oh, I'll be really present. And then you know, you find out that actually the present moment can be really challenging. Being present, fully alive, it's complicated. It doesn't mean you're in bliss all the time. It means you're experiencing the full catastrophe, as I guess it comes from Zorba the Greek, but I know it from John Kabat-Zinn. And so this practice really, when you look at it as a training, it is a development of inner strength. Well, someone mentioned Carlos Castaneda to me yesterday. He used the term personal power. This inner strength, this ability to be present wholly with all of it. You know, you don't want to go in there without the tools to live. And obviously the 12-step program and recovery programs are helping us to cultivate tools, and so is the Dharma. But it's an ongoing job. Um, so I think that's a good place to wrap up. Gives me a few minutes to clear out of my hotel room before they, you know, come in here with the cart and throw me out. Um, I appreciate you guys showing up and, you know, being with me. And I'll be back on Tuesday. And I think this Friday is my Spirit Rock class. Did you put that in there, Monica? Is that happening on Friday? I could look for myself. So the Spirit Rock happens at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, the second Friday of each month. And then next Tuesday, I will be at the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery in person for anybody who's in the Bay Area.
And it looks like on the 18th and the 19th, you're
Oh, yeah.
participating in the Buddhist Recovery Network.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah, the Buddhist Recovery Network is having a virtual conference summit. Claude Anshin Thomas, the Zen monk and Vietnam veteran, is going to be our keynote speaker. And then Vimala Sar and I are going to give a talk on the 19th. Yeah, so
How do we
sign
access
up for
that?
that. I think, did you put the link in there?
Oh, we did.
Yeah. So, and if you just look up Buddhist Recovery Network, it'll be on the front page of their website, pretty sure. You
Got it.
just, and I don't imagine there's any cost. There might be some minimal cost, but that's usually Dana based. And that weekend is also the No Kings on October 18th, which I'm going to also be attending. So I'm going to be balancing Dharma and politics. And I'm expecting that there will be a big backlash against these marches, given the current state of militarization. I'm off the clock now. I'm talking about stuff. Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you, Kevin.
Peace.
Thank you,
I'll see
Kevin.
you next
Thank you,
week.
Stay in the
Kevin.
present
Thank
moment,
you.
my
Safe
friend.
travels.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to see you.
Yeah. Thanks.